Look, it says it's setting up webinar for Facebook Live. I'll let you know when I see it happening.
Okay. I just got a message that John Fisher is live now. And there you are.
Okay, good. So I'm live now and that's happening, yes?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So, so now I'm the host and I'm, let's just make sure I'm in live stream and you're going to record and you're confident that
Right.
you can do that. Okay. Well, I'll check back in with you in just a little bit.
Well, let's do check. Let's try one check. Do you see anywhere where it says recording at this point?
It does not. Oh, yes, it does. There it is. It says recording.
Okay.
Okay.
Good.
And
I paused the recording now.
okay. So you're recording to your computer, right?
Right.
Okay.
Well, I assume that's what it'll do.
Okay.
I mean, that's what it always does.
That's what you've done in the past, right?
Right.
Okay. So I'm going to check in with you later. I'll still be asking you if it's on Facebook Live and it's recording. So just look at your screen because I know you don't have any control.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to screen share.
I'm going to mute myself.
Okay. I'm going to mute myself and go off video. Bye.
Bye.
Hey, Joe, are you there? Joe, I just wanted to check in about my
I
sound.
am here.
Yeah, is the sound on and good?
Sounds on and good.
Okay, it'll just be a few more minutes. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we'll begin shortly. Thank you so much. Okay, and we're recording and we're on Facebook Live. Okay, thanks. I'll be back with you in just a few minutes. Thank you. Hello, my name is John Fisher, and this is Danse Macabre, a tale of the plague. When COVID-19 started, my life, like everybody else's, changes. It changed immensely. I was really into physical fitness. I was riding my bike everywhere. I was riding to the theater, to the office. I was doing all my errands on my bike. And the one place I love to go most, other than theater, other than the office, other than my errands, I love to go to the YMCA. It was great. I would go there and swim, and I'd do weights and work out, and it was great. Push-ups, everything. And then COVID-19 hit, and there was nothing. I couldn't do any of that stuff. And I didn't have to because the theater was closed. We weren't putting on any more shows. The office was closed. We were working remotely. I didn't have all those errands to run because the stores were shut, and the Y was closed. The Y, the wonderful YMCA was shut. And I thought, oh, this is terrible. What am I going to do? I know, with all the worries, that's what I was worried about. But I was so into the physical discipline. So I decided to work out at home. I do as much working out as I could at home. I mean, I could ride my bike, but what was going to replace all the other stuff? So I started doing push-ups in the hallway and jumping jacks and sit-ups and all kinds of things. And then I realized that I could mount my bike on a bike stand, and I could ride my bike at night as well as during the day. I could ride it whenever I wanted. So I got my bike, and I would get on my bike, and I could work out in my hallway on my bicycle. And it was great. I loved being on my bike in the hallway. I loved it, I loved it, I loved it. Now, one thing I also discovered was audiobooks. Now, I know about audiobooks, of course, but I never used them at the gym. And suddenly, there were all these great books from the library that I'd always wanted to read, right? But I didn't have time because I was doing all this other stuff. So I was going to catch up on my audiobooks, right? And one book that I was so excited about listening to was A Distant Mirror by Barbara Tuchman. This amazing book written in 1978. I owned a copy, but I'd never gotten through it. I never had time to finish it. So I was going to sit on my bike and ride and listen to A Distant Mirror. And I thought it was especially appropriate because it was a book written in 1978. And Barbara Tuchman had found a distant mirror for 1978. She called it the calamitous 14th century. Why was it a mirror for 1978? Why was it a mirror? Why was it reflecting back in 1978? Because in the 14th century in Europe, there was social and political upheaval. The continent was racked by insurrections, by revolutions, by risings of people against governments. And also, there was a threat, a physical threat, a devastating threat, the plague. The plague had hit Europe. Now, she, of course, saw that as a mirror of the threat facing people in the United States in 1978, nuke war with the Russians. Yes, that was the distant mirror, all this upheaval, all this discord, and the threat of imminent death. This is an amazing book, and I would listen to it. And then I wanted to find her main source, which is a man named Froissart. Froissart was a French chronicler, and I couldn't find him anywhere online, but finally I looked at archive.org, and there was Froissart, Barbara Tuchman's source for A Distant Mirror. And I could read the original, and I could read Barbara Tuchman's interpretation of it, and it was fascinating. Now, the two of them were writing about the Black Death, the bubonic plague, which struck in 1347. How did it strike? How did it come to Europe? It came in the form of rats, fleas on rats, rat fleas. Now, the rats could be small. They could be little black rats, the ones that came off of boats, or they could be the big brown rats that came through the sewer. They got into people's houses. They bit people. The fleas on them got off the rats and they bit people. And that's how the plague started. It had been going on forever. These rats and the fleas have been biting people. People were used to being bitten by fleas and rats. But now the plague had become virulent. It had become something that could kill people. And it was spreading. Nobody had any idea where it came from. As a matter of fact, they called it the China disease. They thought it came from China. Sound familiar? But it didn't, as it turned out. It came from Central Asia, but they thought it had come from China. Now, what was going to happen? What was going to happen with these people? How were they going to survive, right? Because now it was traveling, and they didn't know how it traveled. And they didn't know that really it was communicated by people and bad sanitation. That's what communicated the Black Death, the plague. What was the cure? Cleanliness and social distancing. Yes, cleanliness and social distancing. But people didn't know that yet. And medicine was useless. The doctors at the time were useless. They weren't helpful. They weren't coming up with a solution to the Black Death. Medicine at the time was seen as an Arab science. The true medicine in the world was coming from the Arab nations, and it was seen as an Arab science. In the West, in Europe, dissection was disallowed. What would they do? They couldn't find out what it was caused. They couldn't even dissect people. It was not allowed by the church because it was blasphemy. It was blasphemous to destroy the body. So how were they going to find out where it came from? They couldn't. They didn't know. What was their solution? Weird things. They started burning aromatic substances to cleanse the air. They thought it was just something that was in the air. They didn't realize it came from other people, from rats, from fleas, from things that people were being bitten by every day. They thought they could just cleanse the air by burning aromatic substances. They believed, these doctors, in weird things like the humors, astrology, bleedings, and prayer. More than anything, everybody in Europe believed in prayer in the 14th century. God would cure them of this disease if he wanted to. If he didn't, he was unhappy. That's why it was visited upon all of us. He had given us the disease. Yes, and we were helpless. Does that sound different from now? Maybe. But there are a lot of people who don't trust medicine now. They don't trust science. They don't trust what they're being told. They won't wear masks. They won't exercise social distancing. They won't. They are frustrated. They believe more in something else, maybe themselves, maybe their own wisdom, but they are not listening to science. The same in the 14th century. The science was backward. It was thought to be Arab science. It was thought to be non-Christian. It wasn't going to help them. Another distant mirror. I'm not sure she was aware when she wrote this book what a mirror would be for us in 2020. I don't even think she could imagine that a plague would strike again. I think she just thought it was nuke war, which we still have. But here it is, a double mirror to our own period. What was important in Europe at the time? Leadership. Leadership would be important. It would be vital, leading the people. And what did that mean? That meant France. France was the dominant country in Europe. And whoever led France was going to lead Europe to a solution or deeper into the pit. Who was the head of France? Charles sank, Charles V, and he was a pretty good king. He was a pretty good king in the middle of the century. Also, the papacy was important. The papacy was very important because there's one thing that everybody across Europe, in the empire, in France, in England, in Spain, in Italy, all across Europe, is one thing that they all shared was Catholicism, was the religion. So the papacy was important. At this time, the papacy was in Avignon, in France. There was a French pope, and his name was Clement VI, Clement VI, and he was pretty good too. He had some great ideas. He almost solved the problem of the plague. He almost figured out that it was about social distancing, almost. But he didn't quite get there, and he certainly didn't communicate to the people how to solve it. He solved it himself, but he wasn't quite sure of that. Also, he was enlightened. When people accused the Jews of being responsible for the plague and started hunting down Jews, killing Jews, people who lived amongst them, Clement VI said, no, don't be ridiculous. The Jews are dying also. What are you, crazy? Leave them alone. They're innocent. Two enlightened leaders in the middle of the 14th century. But this story is not about the middle of the 14th century. This story is about the end of the 14th century. It takes place in 1392, a later date and a very different circumstance and a very different set of rulers. Je m'appelle Olivia de Clisson. Yes, I am the Constable of France. I am the chief of the military. It is 1392 and France is in trouble. The plague has been striking for the entire century since 1347. It has struck 4 times, the most recent in 1388 through 1390, and it was virulent. It was strong. Before it had killed children and old people, but in 1388, it struck the adults. By 1390, 50% of the population of Europe from 1300 had been decimated, killed. There was 50% of the population left from the beginning of the century. Also, the population was suffering from brigandage. Armies had come to France to fight. The British army had come to fight the French. And when the wars ended or there was a truce, the army stayed and the brigands roamed the land, raping, pillaging, destroying towns. Also, by the end of the century, there was a schism. a schism in the church. There was no longer one church. There were two churches, two popes. There was the French Pope in Avignon, Clement VI. Clement VI had been replaced by Clement VII, Clement VII. His opposition was the anti-pope in Rome, Boniface. So there was tension even in the religion. People didn't know which pope to ally themselves with, the French pope or the Italian anti-pope in Rome. And there was what was one day called the 100 Years' War, raging in France. Much of France at the beginning of the century had belonged to Britain, and the British wanted to secure their positions. The French wanted to push them out. And so in the middle of the century, King Philippe of France started a war with the English to try to push them out. But the English fought back. Then his son John II fought back, but the English pushed back in. The French could not defeat the English. The English had their longbow. They could shoot it fast, fast, fast. They also had tactics. They attacked in tactics that used the archers and the cavalry and worked together and always defeated the French. Fortunately, King Charles sank. Charles V had figured out how to fight the English. Don't fight them, run away. So in the middle of the century, Charles ran away and he tired out the English until they went back to England. There was a stalemate in France, but Charles had been smart enough not to fight the English. When he died in 1380, he was succeeded by his son, Charles VI. Charles VI was not as talented a man as Charles V, not at all. He liked to hunt. He liked to go to parties. He liked to run about. He didn't like to sleep. He didn't eat right. He didn't drink right. He drank the wrong things. He was a man who loved life, but he did not like to rule. Fortunately, he gave power to the Marmousets. The Marmousets were men like me, Olivier de Clisson. We were the men who had risen up from the middle classes. We were bourgeois. We didn't represent the nobles' interest. We represented the interests of all the other classes, the peasants, the workers, and the middle class, the bourgeois. Unfortunately, Charles' uncles were not happy. They had the royalty. They wanted to rule France, and they aligned themselves with the Duke of Brittany and turned on me, Olivier de Clisson. They turned on me, the Constable of France, me, because I held the ultimate military power in France. They turned on me. Charles became sick. King Charles was often sick. He did not take care of himself. He was in bed. He was bedridden in Amiens. And we had all been left in Paris to work together, to run the country in his absence. His uncles, his royal uncles and the Duke of Brittany employed a man named Craon. Craon was a wicked man, evil, scheming. They employed him to kill me, Olivier de Clisson, the Constable of France, because I was a Marmousset. I was a bourgeois. I was headed home from my party late one night with 8 of my companions moving through the streets of a darkened Paris. It was quiet. We heard nothing. And then suddenly, from somewhere in front of us, I saw swords begin to fly. I held up my swords. I held my torch, but there were swords, and suddenly the swords started to attack us. We were being attacked on the streets of Paris in the middle of the night. And I fought back, and I was pushed against the door of a bakery, and I was pushed into the bakery. The baker put me in. He slammed the door. He locked it, and my assailants ran. Later, the king heard what had happened, and he sent one of his emissaries to find me, to see if I was all right. I've been stabbed many times, but I've been through many battles. I had many scars, many wounds, and my skin was like armor. They had not penetrated my skin. I was still alive. The king came to me. He was still sick. He looked distraught, upset. And he said to me, you will be revenged. I said, we must keep France whole. We must think about the people. He said, no, 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 you will be revenged. Crayon, the evil man who attacked me, he fled to Brittany. The Duke of Brittany was contacted by the king. The king said, give us Crayon. Duke of Brittany said, I do not know where Crayon is. I do not know anything about Crayon. I'm afraid I can't help you. And then Charles became incensed. He had barely recovered from his sickness. He had not been eating right. He had not been sleeping. He was unstable. He was insane. He'd been drinking only wine. He was crazy. He refused to eat. He refused to drink. He refused to sleep until my assailants had been captured. And so he assembled an army of his uncles and hundreds of knights, thousands of men, and started for Brittany to avenge my attack, to avenge the man who had assaulted me, Crayon, and his sponsor, the Duke of Brittany, not knowing that the uncles had been behind this also. But the army could not be stopped because Charles would not allow it to be stopped. He said, we must attack, we must go to Brittany. And so they went to Brittany. Je m'appelle Charles VI Le Roi. I am King Charles of France. I often think of my father because he was such a talented man. And I wonder how I can be like my father, how I can lead like my father. And he would never allow this attack on his constable. He would never allow it. And so I gathered an army around me, and I headed towards Brittany in a broiling August of 1392. I was sick. I was distraught. I could barely get on my horse. And we galloped towards Brittany, me and my army. It was an expedition along a sandy road in the forest. There was so much dust, I could not breathe from the other horses. I could not breathe. I was exhausted, I was sick, but I had to get revenge. I had to prove that I could lead like my father, Charles V. I had to prove it, I had to prove it. And suddenly, in front of me was a barefooted man. He was wearing a cloak, and he looked crazy, a woodland man, and he said to me, beware, beware, king, beware, you will be betrayed. Turn back, king, you will be betrayed, turn back. Fortunately, some of my pages grabbed him and pulled him away and dragged him away from my horse. Beware, king, beware, king, beware, beware. You will be betrayed. I was distraught. I did not think I could go on. But I took the horse, the bridle, and I led forward. The crazy man had made me crazy. I know it. I knew I was losing my mind. I know it. They told me later what happened. My page was holding my lance. He'd fallen asleep in the saddle, and the lance fell onto a helmet of another page, and I heard this loud clang behind me. And I was shocked. I thought, oh my God, I'm surrounded. I'm surrounded. Traitors! Traitors! There are nothing but traitors around me. They're attacking. And I started swiping at everybody around me. Around me, I started swiping everybody, and nobody would fight back. Everybody was crowding around me, and I stabbed, and I slung, and I hit, and I hit, and I hit, and I hit, and I hit. Traitors! Nobody would fight back. Nobody would fight me back. They would just die. They just fell beside me. And then I realized why nobody was fighting back. Because they were my own men. I was attacking my own men. I had gone mad. And I was surrounded by the dead bodies of my own men, my own nobles, surrounding me. I had gone insane. I had lost my mind. I destroyed my own men as they surrounded me. And I fell into the sand. I had betrayed myself. I had betrayed France. I had betrayed. I was the betrayer. And I passed into a coma. Je m'appelle Guillaume de Hassany. I come from Leon. I am as old as the century. I was born in 1300. It is now 1392. Do the complicated arithmetic if you can. I am a doctor. My century, my 14th century was not a good one. It was a century of many evils. I had decided to become a doctor as a young boy. I went to the University of Paris to study medicine, but I realized they had nothing to teach me. It was all superstition, astrology, bleedings like humors. It was insanity. I left France and went to Salerno to study with the Italian doctors, but I realized that they too had nothing to teach me. It was more insanity, so I decided to go to Cairo to study with the Arabs. And there I discovered a magnificent medicine. The Arabs had taken all of the medicines of antiquity. They had catalogued them. They had systematized them. They had developed them with an emphasis on Hippocrates and Galen. They had assimilated all of the medicines of ancient Greece and Rome and ancient Mesopotamia and Persia and even the ancient medicine of the Ayurveda of antiquity in India into a holistic medicine that was a wonder. From them, I learned what medicine was. Europe at the time was a disaster. There was war between France and Britain. It was unstoppable. No king seemed to be able to stop it. It was ravaging France, destroying the country, and the kings seemed helpless to get rid of the British. There was a schism between the Avignon Pope and the anti-Pope in Rome. The church was in shambles, confusion. Nobody knew what to worship. Nobody knew what was right. There was plague, but nobody knew that it came from rat fleas, from rats. They thought it came from all kinds of strange, ridiculous things. In 1388-90, it became more virulent than ever. By then, 50% of Europe's population had been devastated, killed. I heard many theories of why this was. Overpopulation, ridiculous overpopulation. It wasn't overpopulation. There weren't too many people for the food and water. It was ridiculous. Sin, it was God's judgment. Another reason, ridiculous. God doesn't care about us. He doesn't even notice us. He barely knows we exist. He wouldn't send something like this to us. It'd just make us more trouble with more prayers. And I heard the Jews accused. Ridiculous. The Jews were dying as fast as we were. How could it be the Jews? The cures were humors, fires, and bleedings. Ridiculous. Stupidity, that was the cause. Stupidity.
Science from the Arabs would have solved it all, but nobody would listen to the Arabs because they were considered to be heathens. So I was living in Laos, in Picardy. I was called from Picardy. Yes, I would emerge from my business in Picardy as a doctor. I was summoned by the Sieur de Cossy, my patron. The people of France were distraught as I walked toward the king. I heard the people. They were confused. They were horrified, distraught because they lost their head. They lost their king. He was insane. He was sick. They thought it was the end of the world. It was savage. It was ridiculous. They made effigies of the king and took them to their saints and prayed that the saints could deliver their king from his disease. Ridiculous. The nobles thought that he was overtired, overexercised because he was such an energetic man. Ridiculous. You can't be overtired. That doesn't make you crazy. The anti-pope in Rome thought that it was God's punishment because he supported the French pope in Avignon. Ridiculous. God doesn't get involved in struggles between popes. And the Pope in Avignon thought that he had been overindulged by his uncles. Ridiculous. You can't be overindulged by your uncles. Stupid. Possession, punishment, overexercised, overindulged. All of these things were barbaric. They demonstrated no understanding of illness. I saw him in his bed. He lay there. He looked terrible. I kneeled beside him. He was covered in sweat from head to toe. He looked horrible. He was running a fever, so I held his forehead. Yes, he was hot, very hot. I soothed him, rubbing his forehead, wiping the sweat away. I fed him, feed a cold, starve a fever. I gave him food from my own hand to make sure he'd eat it because he didn't want to eat anything. I fed him. He ate from my hand. I made sure he ate. And he saw that someone cared. The other doctors had written him off. They said he was dying. Let him die. There was nothing we could do. I thought, we can comfort him with food. Feed a cold. Starve that fever. I made him drink liquids and not wine. Water. Pure water. He sipped it as I held his head up. He wasn't sleeping at night, so I made him sleep. I made sure he was comfortable. I closed his eyes, I turned off the lights, and I rubbed his forehead until he slept. And he would wake and he would say, I can't sleep, I can't sleep. My thoughts. I said, no, close your eyes. Sleep. If you lay there for 8 hours with your eyes closed, in the dark, you are sleeping. You might not think you're sleeping, but you are. It's the secret of sleep. Just lay there with your eyes closed for 8 hours and you are asleep. He slept, he ate, he drank, and the fever went away. It started to disappear, and his thoughts became clear, and he became lucid once again. This King Charles of France. So I read to him from my favorite book, the Old Testament, my favorite story in the Old Testament, the story of Judith and Holofernes. And Judith prayed to God to make her lie well, to tell fibs, to tell stories. And with those stories inspired by God, she seduced Holofernes, commander of the enemy army, and he took her into his bed, and for 3 nights, 4 nights, 5 nights they enjoyed carnal circuses. They were ecstatic in bed, athletic in bed. They were intercoursal for a week. And when finally Holofernes was sated, he fell asleep into a deep slumber, and Judith rose from his bed. She removed the sword he had by his bed from its scabbard. She raised it above his sleeping head, and she hacked at his sleeping head, hacked at his sleeping head, hacked. She threw the sword away, she yanked his head off. And there it was. His eyes rolled back in his head. The blood squirting from a stump of bone hanging down, and viscera hanging down to the bed. And she kissed it one last time. And she called her maid in, and she had the maid put the head into a bag of meat, and then she and the maid snuck out of the enemy camp. They returned to Jerusalem, and she held the head aloft for the Israelites, for the people of Israel. And she said, "Behold, the head of our enemy's general Holofernes." And the crowd of Israelites cheered for the blood, the viscera, the bones, and the rolled back eyes. Ha ha ha. That, of course, was my own translation. And then I asked him, Charles, to read to me, and he read to me from my favorite story, David and Goliath, where David chops off the head of Goliath. I love the stories where the heads get chopped off. They are so exciting. And I brought him back to health. And I realized that what he needed now was exercise. He was an energetic young man, and he needed exercise. He needed to get out. He needed to enjoy the outdoors as he always had. So I took him outside, and he was a wonderful hunter. He knew how to spear the boar and shoot his arrows from horseback at the deer. And he would take his lance and lance the stag. He was a wonderful hunter. And the exercise revived him even more. And he was a terrific rider. I could watch him ride all day, and I gave him plenty of food and talk. He loved to talk. I told him that his illness was no punishment. God didn't care about anything like that, such that he would be punished with illness. I told him that exercise was good. You can't be over-exercised. I told him that indulgence was good. You can't overindulge within limits, all right? Use your brain. Think about how you indulge, but you can't overindulge. And I told him that the only possession of him, that he wasn't possessed by devils. The only thing he'd ever been possessed by was bad, stupid advice from his uncles, from his wife, the queen, from those doctors who didn't know how to save him. That was his only possession. I took him to Cray on the river Wa, with that lovely air and oxygen. We breathed it in, and it brought both of our youth back to us. It made me feel like I was 82 again. I felt as young as spring. The air was wonderful, and I discovered that he was a charming man. A wonderful young man. He asked me about those he had killed. He felt horrible about the men he'd killed, all the men he'd killed in his madness, his confrères. And I said, "Oh, nonsense. I don't know how many you killed. People say it was 50, people say it was 1. I've got no idea. First of all, find out how many you actually killed. I think it's just 1. And then the only thing you can do is go to that one man's family, his father, his mother, his wife, his children, his brothers, his sisters, and apologize. Say you regret everything that you did to him. Say you regret his passing, and they will forgive you because you are the king, you are God's anointed. Of course they'll forgive you, and they will be grateful at your humility. Find them and apologize. And when they've forgiven you, you must live with it. You must. That is being a man, accepting responsibility, apologizing if you can, and living with your mistakes. I have sinned my whole life. I sin still. One thing I know is evil, and I do it to this day. But I live with my sin, because that is what it is to be a man, to live with it, whatever it is. He said that Charles sank his father. Charles V cast a huge shadow over him. I said, nonsense. Charles V is in his grave. You can't cast a shadow when you're in the grave. You're too low. You're underground. You have to be above ground. You have to be tall to cast a shadow. Don't be ridiculous. He can't cast a shadow on you anymore. And he wasn't that impressive a king. What? Oh, he didn't solve anything. He ran away from battle. That was good strategy, but he didn't stop the war with the English. He never stopped the plague. He never stopped the plague from advancing. And he never healed the church. It still is in schism. It is still separated. These are things you can do. You can do all of this if you take care of yourself, if you eat, drink, sleep, and exercise. Your mind will be clear, and you can succeed where your father failed, and then you can cast a shadow over him, over his grave. You will be the great monarch of the 14th century if you take care of yourself and stay healthy. He asked me how I knew that he wasn't going to die. I said, common sense. You're 25. 25-year-olds don't die. Men my age die. If I'd seen you were 92 like me, I would have said, well, he's dead. Let him be dead. 25? That's common sense. That's the difference between Arab medicine and Western medicine. Arab medicine and Christian medicine. That is the difference. Arab medicine is full of common sense. You look at something, you see, young, sick, we can fix this. It's not hocus pocus. We embarked on a pilgrimage of thanks. Across France, we thanked everyone. And we showed everyone that Charles, their king, was well, that he had not lost his head like Holofernes or David Goliath. He was whole. The country had a head once again, and he apologized to those he must apologize to. He apologized to all his people, and they accepted it because he was their king. We returned to Paris. I returned him healthy to Paris, and they begged me to stay. I said, no, I must get back to Leon, where I live, where I have my patients. I give him back to you in good health. Don't worry or irritate him. His mind will grow strong. It is weak now, but it is getting stronger. Burden him not with worry. Pleasure and forgiveness will be better for him than anything else. Oh, how they heeded my caution, those clever people I turned him over to. I should have stayed. His uncles seized power, and they and his queen kept him well distracted. They entertained him. They kept him amused so they could have power. They were very careful not to go too far until one day their indulgence became decadence, and they destroyed France. And in that moment, they destroyed all the work I'd done to save Charles VI, Charles VI of France.
Je m'appelle Huguet. Many people think that I am wicked. I'm not wicked. I'm a man who provides entertainment. People love my entertainment. They do. The French, the Germans, the Spaniards, everybody loves the entertainment of Huguet. I am mischievous, but I mean to provide fun for the queen, for the dukes, the earls, the propertied, for the king, my king. Je m'appelle Huguet. What followed was the Bal des Ardents. the ball of the burning things, to which the king was invited. As a matter of fact, he would be the center of this outrageous event. It was based around a wedding. There was supposed to be a wedding for the queen's lady-in-waiting. There'd be a party for her to celebrate her remarriage. Now, because it was a remarriage, she would have a party that made mockery. It was supposed to be fun. It was supposed to be decadent. It was supposed to be silly. It was not supposed to be dangerous. The lady-in-waiting would have a remarriage party full of noise, mockery, raucous costumes. And Hukaway was put in charge of the most important part of the party, which would be the masquerade. Hukaway asked the king and 4 other friends if they would all dress up as woodland savages, savage men for the masquerade. And then everybody would have to figure out which of them was the king. These wood savages had amazing costumes where they disappeared into them. These costumes were made of sewn on linen, sewn on tightly, tight to the skin, over the feet, over the body, over the head. Everything was buried in this linen. And then the linen was soaked with resinous wax all over. The wax was designed to hold frazzled hemp, so they would look like hairy woodland creatures, like the forest man who warned him about betrayal. But the king was not thinking. He didn't realize that this might be a betrayal. And now he was in this highly flammable costume for the Bal des Ardents, the ball of the burning things. Now, the rule was that there could be no torches because these were highly flammable costumes that they were wearing, covering them head to toe, and one spark could set all 6 of them on fire, and one of them was the king. And on the night of the ball, they were dressed as these woodland savages, and they had the dance of the savages, a wild, crazy nighttime dance of the 4 woodland savages, and it was crazy with noise, and they howled like wolves. And they made lewd gestures with their hands. And it was a crazy, wild dance. And the purpose of the dance was for them to dance up to people, and people were supposed to see if they could guess who was who. Who was who? Could they figure out which one was the king? And this wild bacchanal continued all night. But there were no torches because of these crazy costumes. In these crazy costumes, they could be set afire so easily. And they danced all night, crazy, and dancing up to people, and dancing up to people. And the queen and the ladies in waiting cheered for Hukaway, the king, and the 4 other woodland creatures as they danced their crazy dance all night. And finally, very late at night, one guest arrived. It was the Prince Louis, the brother of the king. He arrived late. He was very, very drunk. And he was moving towards the ball, towards the party. And suddenly he walked into the party holding a torch. And he stood there at the door with his torch, barely able to stand. And he saw the dancing woodland creatures, and he realized that it was a masquerade, and he was going to figure out who it was that was the king. Which one was the king? Which one was Hukaway? And the drunk Prince Louis walked up to each of the dancers and looked close. Look close. Are you the king? No, you're not the king. And he would go up to another dancer. Are you the king? Are you the king? No, you're not the king. And another. Are you the king? You the king? No, you're not the king. And each time the torch got closer, and he continued to look for the king with his torch, and finally a spark fell on to one of the dancers and set him alight. And suddenly, one of the woodland creatures in those vulnerable costumes was set alight, and he continued to dance, and the others then become lit. They were all dancing about, all of them being lit by the torch, lit by each other, till all 6 of them were burning, screaming with pain, and the dance became a wicked dance of death. The Bal des Ardents, the ball of that dancing
burning things they danced. They danced about the ballroom, screaming in pain. The women were screaming. Everybody was screaming. This dance of death. All these men were burning, and one of them was the king. And nobody knew which one was the king. The only one who knew what was the king, the only one who could identify him was his queen, Queen Isabeau, but she fainted in panic, and the fires spread. They spread, and Prince Louis was horrified himself. He had set all of them on fire, and they burned in the savage dance, the Bal des Ardents. The screams were deafening. Finally, one of them realized that he could throw himself into a vat of wine, and he put himself out. Another one of them ran to a lady in waiting, and she was wearing a large skirt, and she threw the skirt over him, and he went out. But the four remained dancing wildly, dancing crazily about the dance floor, setting each other afire, screaming, and those four would die. One died that night. Two of the others lingered for 2 days, screaming in agony. Their costumes had been soldered to their bodies. They screamed from their burns and finally succumbed. And finally, Hugouet, the villain who had organized it all just for fun, as he said, he screamed for vengeance. This was an assassination. I've been assassinated. He screamed for 3 days in pain, and finally even he succumbed. It was the Bal des Ardents. Time passed, and everybody knew what had happened. It was discovered that the one man who had been saved was the king by the lady in waiting who had thrown her cloak over him. Him and the one who jumped into the wine were the only two who were saved, the only ones who could be saved from the flames. The king had survived, but word quickly spread of what happened. And the people of France were appalled. Their king was mad still. He was recovering, and he was taken to this horrifying ball. He was covered from head to toe in tight linen, flammable linen, and then he was accidentally set on fire. Why was he put in such a vulnerable position? This was pure decadence. It was insanity. Was this the royal family of France? They forgave the king, but they would forgive nobody else, not the queen. Not Prince Louis, who they thought had done it intentionally. They thought that it was regicide. Pure decadence. And for 400 years, the royal families of France were accused of decadence, which all began that night at the Bal des Ardents, the ball of the burning things. And 400 years later, exactly, in 1793, finally, Louis XVI was beheaded. And the people saw the decadence brought to an end. I heard about all this in Lyon, the Bal des Ardents. And to me, it seemed fitting for this century, this calamitous century. I saw it as the Danse Macabre, the dance of death. This was a theme becoming very popular in murals and street performances. Death will take us all. He dances amongst us. He will take king, abbot, peasant, and squire. He will take us all in his dance of death. Think on that. Think the plague, the war, the brigands. Any of them could take you at any moment. Think on that was the lesson. Think on that and do good deeds. Do them. But I had a different interpretation. I said, think on that and don't do good deeds. Save our world. Change it. Understand it and bring about change. That was my interpretation. I pointed to the murals of the Dance of Death, the figures, a skeleton, a priest, another skeleton grinning, a cardinal, another skeleton grinning, a prince, another skeleton grinning, a pope, and all of them holding hands and dancing merrily, their skeletons happy, 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 and the prelates, the popes, the princes looking terrified. We are all in a dance of death now. We all must take what's left and live and change. I died in 1793, the same year as the Bal des Ardents, the ball of the flaming things. I instructed that my burial effigy not be like other burial effigies. After then, when you were buried, your effigy, which sat on your tomb, was meant to be you at 33, which was the age of Christ when he was crucified. You at your best, at your most splendid. So when you ascended to heaven, you would look your best for eternity. That was your effigy, but my effigy. I insisted that my effigy be about the coat of death. It be me at 93. There I was, gaunt in the face, skinny in the chest, the flesh clinging to my bones. I covered my genitals and my skinny legs stretched out beneath me. Me and my skinniness at 93. Extreme. And I wanted people to see my body. And I wanted them to realize that this is what death looks like. Nothingness. We must change while we live before we look like me in the grave. And I was the first effigy of this kind. It became an obsession of the 15th century. I was the first. We must change. Change the world, or we will continue the dance of death and change nothing.
Thank you for joining me. My name is John Fisher, and this has been the Danse Macabre, the Dance of Death. And as you know, at Theater Rhinoceros, we have been putting on performances since COVID-19 began. And I just wanted to show you something. This is Guillaume de Harsigny. That is his funeral effigy. That's what you see in France when you go to see his grave. There he is at 93. It was the first time this had been done. It's not idealized at all. And he wanted us to have the message, change. Change while you live. You're not going to be pretty in heaven. This is all that's left, just death. If you'd like to contribute to our theater company and support us in this time of struggle, COVID-19, here's our donations page. You can go to therhino.org, or you can mail a check to me at my home address, Theater Rhinoceros, 91 Central Avenue, Suite number 102, San Francisco, California, 94117. We continue next week with another Thursday night solo performance. I'll be performing a play called Growing Up, The World in 1976. But thank you so much for joining me and being a part of our COVID-19 programming. We're Theater Rhinoceros, and we're here, we're queer, and we're hanging in there. Thanks for joining me. Good night.